Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for, where the #1 high school player in America, AJ Dybantsa, it was right around 11 a.m. Eastern time. He goes on First Take. He was down to 4 schools: BYU, Alabama, North Carolina, and Kansas. And AJ Dybantsa on First Take with Stephen A. Smith and Molly Karam committed to the BYU Cougars. Now, we did a full reaction in real time, and I think that one was really designed for BYU fans. Who is this kid? What is he about? How is he going to fit in with Kevin Young and his system? But what I want to do now is kind of do the bigger picture reaction, because I think there's been an interesting conversation, to say the least, about this commitment. And I think there are really 2 conversations that everybody seems to want to ask. Unfortunately, none of it is about BYU, their program, Kevin Young as their head coach. It's frankly, how much is this kid getting paid? Why would he go to BYU, a school with religious overtones? There are perfectly logical reasons and answers to both, and I want to go ahead and get into them. And I want to give you fact from fiction, okay? By the way, if you are a BYU fan listening to this, make sure you're following our Torres on BYU account. All BYU coverage all the time. That's on Twitter, Torres on BYU. So let's get into this. We'll talk about AJ Dybantsa in a second. But you know, first of all, I should just spend 30 seconds. BYU fans know who he is. I think college basketball fans know who he is. Let me just spend 30 seconds talking about who he is as a player. He's one of the more special high school players I've ever seen. I don't want to oversell it. Listen, there's been a lot of players that have been hyped as the next this, the next that, the next whatever. What I will tell you is he is an awesome high school basketball player. I think one of the more complete players that I've ever seen. Kind of on the breakdown that we did right when he committed, I talked about the fact that one basically can do pretty much everything, okay? He's 6'8", 6'9". I know the comparison on First Take that they made was to a Tracy McGrady type, but he can put the ball on the floor. He can attack the rim. He can finish at the rim. He's got the mid-range. He can shoot as well. But what really stands out to me about him is 2 things that sometimes you don't see from a player so young. One, what I love about AJ Dybantsa is that he competes as hard on the defensive end as the offensive end, okay? So many high school players, listen, we're all young. We all want to get ours. We were all the same way when we played, okay? But so many high school players, it's all about, if I'm not scoring, I'm not contributing, I don't care, I'm not playing defense. And AJ Dybantsa, listen, all these kids say, I'll do whatever it takes to win. I'll score 20 or I'll do. No. He really is, and he takes just as much pride in playing elite defense as he does offense as well. So one, I love the fact that he competes on both ends. I've watched a lot of great high school players through the years, a lot of guys that are in the NBA now. Most of them really don't care about defense, or if they do, they're only really engaged on defense when the offense is clicking. That's not AJ Dybantsa. But the other thing is, this is a kid that I think has continued to ascend even as the #1 player in America. And that's just not something that you see that often. A lot of times kids get ranked really high early in their college or early in their high school careers. The #1 recruit is an 8th grader, is a 9th grader, and they're kind of forgotten about by the time they're a senior in high school. With AJ, and credit his family, credit his parents around him, they've kept that circle tight, and he just keeps getting better. He's not a kid that read the press clippings when he was 13, 14 years old, whatever, and said, I'm a finished product. No. He keeps getting better. He keeps adding things to what he does and to his game and what makes him special as a player. With that said, it is and should be a special day for BYU. But unfortunately, when the #1 high school player in America commits to a school that isn't Duke, that isn't Kentucky, that isn't Kansas, that isn't UNC, unfortunately, it doesn't feel like anybody wants to celebrate BYU, but instead absolutely tear them down. And as soon as he committed, it immediately becomes every fan base, oh, he's just getting paid so much money. And then there's all sorts of reports about how much he's getting paid. Listen, a couple guys that I like, I saw Adam Zagoria, producer Matt, you could pop that tweet really quick. Adam Zagoria, who admittedly is pretty plugged in with the family, He said, quote, "I'm told AJ Dybantsa's NIL number was close to 7 million. Jeff Goodman, who definitely is close to the family, has done interviews with AJ, said the number was close to $5 million. What I can say is a couple things. One, the kid ain't going to college for free. Well, I mean, he is technically going to college for free, but he's obviously getting paid. But we have talked about this NIL stuff, and I think there is a complete misperception about how NIL is working in this recruitment and the role that it played, okay? I'm not saying he didn't get paid, but there's no other way for me to put it. If you think the only reason this kid chose BYU is money, respectfully, you're an idiot. And respectfully, I think even just the context in which we're discussing this is kind of screwy and I think just factually incorrect. So first of all, because people are going to ask me, Torres, why would you go to BYU for any reason other than money? Okay, well, first of all, we actually had Kevin Young on this show. And one thing I always try to do is I always try to bring on the players that, not literal players, but the proverbial players that matter in the college sports space and let them explain themselves. And so we had Kevin Young on, and what he said is this was during the summer when they had success. They got Cannon Catchings, who, of course, is projected one and done, Yegor Demon, who's projected one and done, and they had a lot of success in recruiting immediately. And the question became, well, it's just about NIL. And what Kevin Young told us was essentially it is a three-pronged approach, why he believes he has had success. He said, one, listen, I came from the NBA, okay? And for people who do not remember, he was the lead assistant with the Phoenix Suns last year, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, etc. He interviewed for NBA head coaching jobs. I think it was either the Brooklyn Nets or the Philadelphia. It must have been Brooklyn Nets because I don't think Philadelphia opened this offseason. And listen, his team is playing a very much NBA style. Top 30 in three-point attempts, top 30 in three-point makes, top 30 in scoring in college basketball this year. So he came from the NBA. He has an NBA system. He has an NBA staff, NBA trainers, personnel, whatever. He also mentioned, I think it's important, you get a chance to play in the Big 12. So listen, not everyone could go to Kansas. Not everyone could go to Houston, Iowa State, whatever. But the Big 12 in most years is the best conference of college basketball. This year, it's probably number 2 behind the SEC. But he said, look, we're selling the best conference in college basketball, a great fan base, 19,000 people in our arena when it comes to home games. And yes, also on top of the NBA and on top of playing in the Big 12, there is the NIL component. I played this sound in the opening segment that I did on AJ Dybantsa, but here is BYU head coach Kevin Young on NIL and the role it's playing in his recruiting.
You know, the NIL piece is what we've, and when I say we, our collective has been able to do is they've just been able to help us be competitive with the other schools in the country.
Sure.
So there isn't a deficit from other schools in the country to BYU. We're on the same playing field, and I give our guys credit for that. That's basically what has happened. It's been like
That was Kevin Young on a cool, hip little podcast called the Aaron Torres Pod earlier this summer. And listen, you know, again, he just said it. He said it's 3 prongs, and NIL is going to play a factor. There's no doubt. And our collective and our school allows us to be competitive. In other words, you know, we're not getting outbid, but we're not far behind, but it's not the only reason people are choosing us. So you can believe him. You cannot believe him. It's up to you. But what I'm here to say is there is more than just NIL to choose BYU. And what I would also say about the Dybantsa stuff is this, couple things. One, we've talked about it a million times. Listen, let me even backtrack for half a second, okay? I am not here to say that NIL played no role in AJ Dybantsa's decision to go to BYU. It's the NIL era. You should take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to you. I get that. I am not saying that you shouldn't make a decision in some way, shape, or form based on money. I'm not saying it should be the only decision, and that is the part that I think so many people get so misconstrued in this NIL era. Listen, you can agree with me, you can disagree with me, whatever. All I'm here to tell you, my job is to cover this stuff. My job is to talk to people behind the scenes. My job is to talk to parents, coaches, whatever. And what I often hear from most parents, most players, even most coaches behind the scenes is that, yes, NIL plays a role in every commitment that happens in 2024. But the NIL being the sole component, especially for elite players and maybe more specifically elite basketball players, it's not as big of a decision as you think. And here's why. Let me explain it. It is because NBA money is like monopoly money right now, okay? And so right now, if you are a high leverage high school basketball player, you are 1 year away from making life-changing generational money in the NBA, more specifically if you have that 8, 10, 12-year deal, okay? And when you look at the NBA, look at some of these extensions that have happened in the NBA. The rookie contract isn't where you get paid, but the second contract is where you make life-changing money. I think it was what, like Scotty Barnes made like 270 million last year in the offseason. Like guys that aren't even that good are making contracts that are paying them 30, 40, 50 million dollars a year. I said it on our show, with Dybantsa earlier in the day. Jason Tatum just signed an extension that will pay him $71 million in the final year of his contract, okay? And so I just bring it up because if you're a player like AJ Dybantsa, why are you going to make a college commitment based solely on money? You're going to take an extra million here if it could cost you hundreds of millions in the long run. It doesn't even make sense. And so, yes, I think NIL played a role. I think it is overblown. And let me say this, I think some of the numbers are misconstrued and just factually incorrect, okay? First of all, we have to remember is a few things. Producer Matt, you could pop up my tweet from earlier in the day. One, let's call a spade a spade. I work in the media. I know how different people try to play different media members off of whatever. And what I can tell you is, you know where some of this information, oh, he's getting 7 million, he's getting 10 million, he's getting 20 million, whatever it is. And I'm not criticizing Adam Zagori. I like Adam Zagori. I think he's actually a very, very good reporter. I'm just using it as a hypothetical. But you know who has the most incentive to say, oh, the only reason AJ Dybantsa went to BYU is because he got paid? It's the coaches that are recruiting against BYU. Because at the end of the day, think about it. And I'm not accusing North Carolina of anything. I'm not accusing Kansas of anything. But let's say you are North Carolina. And let's say you did just lose the number one player in America to BYU. And you're Hubert Davis, and you got to go to your boosters, you got to go to your people, and they're a little distracted with Bill Belichick right now. But you got to go to your boosters and explain, hey, how did I not close on the number one player in America, and how did he end up at BYU? What's the easy answer? Oh, BYU, they've just got unlimited funds. There's no way we could possibly compete with them. Da, 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 da. And I'm not saying BYU didn't pay, but what I am saying is it's probably a little bit overblown in terms of how much. Same with Kansas. Kansas just lost the number one recruit in America to BYU. BYU, by the way, of course, in their conference. Well, can't blame Bill Self. It's just BYU is spending money like crazy. And here's the other thing, and I think it's important. It was also on that tweet. Producer Matt, you can pop it up again, is we have to understand, when we're talking about these crazy dollar figures, we have to understand, when we talk NIL, there is a difference between what a kid gets paid from his collective, from the school specifically, and what the kid is making in NIL. And so if you watched AJ Dybantsa's commitment on First Take, did you notice something? He was wearing a Red Bull hat, okay? Listen, by the way, I learned apparently Red Bull in the Mormon church. I'm not making fun of anybody. I didn't know if that was kosher or not. Apparently you could drink Red Bull, not coffee. I don't know. And BYU fans criticize me in the comments for not knowing all the details. I apologize. But you think that Red Bull hat happened to fall on his head by happenstance? You think that Red Bull hat, he just had it in the closet and that's what he wanted to wear on First Take? No, Red Bull's paid him a lot of money and they should. They just got a lot of free advertising on First Take thanks to AJ Dybantsa. Now, it's not free because they're paying him, but the point I'm trying to make is if you think all of this money is solely coming from BYU, it's not. These kids now have major agencies working with them, behind the scenes people. Cooper Flagg has a deal with Gatorade. Paige Becker's at UConn. Listen, I don't know all the details, but I know a lot about what goes on at UConn. She's probably clearing $4, $5, $6 million as well. You think that's all coming from UConn? Stop. Caleb Williams, the number I heard last year at USC was $4 million. think you, and that was even in LA, people were like, I heard USC is paying Caleb Williams $4 million. It's like USC doesn't have $4 million to pay Caleb Williams. USC is paying him something, but he's in those Dr. Pepper commercials. He's in those Wendy's commercials, whatever the commercials were. And it's the same with AJ Dybantsa. So BYU fans, let me say this. By the way, I did have one other question. Producer Matt, pop up Rob Guerra's tweet. Rob Guerra is a very good friend of mine. He works at Fox Sports Radio, because he did ask me another common question that I get all the time, which is he asked me, and he's a great guy, and I might even be on one of his shows later today. He said, is AJ Dybantsa Mormon? And so I did want to address that really quick, because I get that all the time. By the way, Rob Guerra, shout out to RG. He's one of the best people in sports media. But look, he asked a question I get a lot. And what I will tell you, we didn't have time to pull this clip from Kevin Young, but I asked him about it as well. And he said point blank, like, we use it. We don't only recruit Mormon people. We don't only recruit people that are religious, but the honor code does apply to all of our players. And the truth of the matter is we use it as a recruiting tool, as a recruiting strength. Hey, you can come here, and if you do what you're supposed to do, the NBA is never going to have questions about you. We know what they know what the limitations are on this campus. They know what you're allowed and not allowed to do as a BYU student. And because of it, if you can come here and stay out of trouble for a year, NBA teams are never going to have to question your character or your interest or how focused you are on basketball. So BYU fans, I'm trying to answer questions so you don't have to. And I'm not saying AJ Dybantsa didn't get paid. I'm not saying he didn't get paid handsomely. What I am saying is there is a lot of rumor, a lot of innuendo. I wanted to clear it up. I wanted to get it straight. But I think also more importantly, what I want to do is BYU fans, take a moment and celebrate this, okay? Because this is a moment that you should not have to apologize for. This is a moment that you should not have to explain yourself. This is a moment that you should celebrate, that you should be happy, because here's the truth. I believe as long as Kevin Young is there, you are going to have elite teams that are built to win big in the regular season. You saw earlier this year the recruiting success. You bring in Yegor Demin in the offseason. He's a top NBA prospect that is now like in top 3 consideration after playing at BYU. You bring in Cannon Catchings. You bring in AJ Dybantsa in this class. You bring in Xavier Staten in this class as well. I'm just bringing it up because I don't think this thing's slowing down with Kevin Young. And as I said in my reaction video, listen, you should be celebrating today. Don't let other fan bases and coaches and whoever steal your joy, because this is a historic day. And I truly believe that as long as Kevin Young is at BYU, they're going to be really good. They're sitting at like 7-2 right now. Only losses overtime against Ole Miss. And they traveled 3,000 miles cross country to Providence and lost to a Providence team with Bryce Hopkins coming back. So I bring it up because I think BYU fans, you should be excited. You should be happy. You're building yourself a power. Do not let anybody steal your joy.